Picture this. A man sits alone in his car after a long day, gathering his thoughts before walking into his home. He's carrying burdens you can't see, fighting battles you'll never know about. Not because he doesn't want to share them, but because he's learned the hard way that sharing comes at a price. Men aren't emotionless, they're wounded. When a man finally opens up, it's like watching a fortress lower its drawbridge. That moment is rare, precious, and incredibly vulnerable. But here's what happens all too often. That vulnerability gets weaponized against them. Think about it. How many times has a man shared his feelings with you, only to have those same feelings thrown back in his face during an argument weeks or months later? It's like handing someone your heart and watching them use it as ammunition. "I'm fine. It's all good. Don't worry about it." These aren't just phrases, they're armor. When you hear these words, understand that behind them often lies a storm of unspoken thoughts and feelings. Men have mastered the art of saying, "I'm fine," while drowning inside. Many men choose silence not because they can't communicate, but because they're exhausted from having their reality questioned, their feelings dismissed, and their pain minimized. They're tired of being labeled the bad guy in every story, even when they're hurting the most. Imagine sharing your deepest fears, only to be told you're too sensitive or that you're making a big deal out of nothing. Imagine expressing hurt feelings, only to watch the situation get flipped around until somehow you're the one apologizing. This is the reality many men face when they try to communicate. A lot of women start taking men for granted because they know these men won't leave. They end up disrespecting them, thinking their loyalty is a weakness when it's actually a strength. But what most women don't see is how men rebuild themselves, brick by brick, battle by battle, all in silence. They grow stronger through their struggles, not weaker. They become more selective about who they let into their lives, not because they're cold, but because they've learned the value of protecting their peace. That man who seems distant, he's probably fought more battles by breakfast than most people fight all day. That man who keeps things to himself, he's learned that silence is sometimes safer than sharing. That man who says he's fine, he's carrying weights you can't see and solving problems you don't know exist. Men don't need validation from crowds. They don't need their struggles broadcast to the world. But when they do let someone into their circle, it's a deliberate choice, a sign of deep trust that shouldn't be taken lightly. So the next time you wonder why the man in your life won't open up, remember this. His silence isn't weakness. It's often the result of too many times his voice was ignored, his feelings were dismissed, or his vulnerability was used as a weapon against him. The truth is, men aren't afraid of communication. They're afraid of what happens when they do communicate. They're afraid of having their trust betrayed, their emotions invalidated, and their deepest feelings turned into tomorrow's ammunition. Before you judge a man's silence, ask yourself, have you created a safe space for his voice? Because sometimes the loudest cry for help is absolute silence.